You're listening to Trysteropod episode 10. I'm David Kulma, the other guy's Dorian Wallace. This is a podcast of two composers, musicians, leftists, and I guess angry people. I'm angry. Are you angry, Dorian?
I've got anger in me.
Okay, well, that's good. All right. Well, so we talk about things, and it inevitably leads to politics. That is leftist politics, and complaining about extreme right politics and fascists. So, we haven't recorded in about a month, and just so everybody knows that when you're listening to this, we are recording this on Tuesday, February 4th, in that dead time period between when the Democrats released 62% of the vote in Iowa and yet have yet to release the rest of the results.
Yeah.
And apparently Donald Trump is going to deliver the State of the Union, which, of course, who gives a fuck? And the Democrats and the impeachment will be over tomorrow. So... So we're choosing to record at we'll call it a dead period.
A dead period. And
Nothing's happening. Nothing's happening. Anyway, how you doing, Dorian?
Good. Looking forward to what we get wrong when people actually listen to this.
By our very nature, we'll get most of it wrong.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Right.
Cool. So. I guess to start off, I got to play a really cool gig a couple weeks ago. It was WobFest 2020 with my new band called Social Ecology Project, and then we also accompanied this awesome activist socialist choir called Sing in Solidarity. And so WobFest, for those that don't know, it's basically the annual music festival for the IWW, who are the industrial workers of the world, one big union. They're known as
we can pretty well assume that anybody listening to this knows who the IWW is. Yeah.
Yeah. So they're called the Wobblies, so it's WobFest, and it was awesome playing for that crowd. When there were some DSA people there, and they were the most conservative status quo people in the room. That was a nice the people who think Elizabeth Warren is too far right were the most right-wing people in the room. It was great.
Yeah, we share their opinion of that.
Yeah, exactly.
Mm-hmm.
It was super fun. It was so cool because Social Ecology Project, it's a free improv group. No drummer, just saxophone, guitar, and synthesizer. And we're all composers, and we're all really we come from sort of the Ornette Coleman school of thought or the Sun Ra school of thought. And it was just really interesting because we weren't sure how this crowd was going to respond to this free improv stuff, but we found out that if you yell "fuck Donald Trump" and if you quote things by Murray Bookchin and then play free improv, they go nuts. But then it was so cool because we had the chorus come up, and we just sang. We sang excerpts from Three Penny Opera, and we actually brought a drummer up for this. We did the Army song from Three Penny Opera, which is a satire piece on imperialism and military violence. And we also did, the Brecht We Are the United, or Song of the United Front. We also did El Pueblo Unida, the famous Chilean song that our man, Frederick Jeffsky, did one of the most badass theme and variations for solo piano. But anyways, it was just so cool being at this, basically punk rock and bluegrass fest, and playing noise music for 20 minutes, and then playing, early 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 20th century workers songs with a choir, and just it was a surprisingly cool experience with just the two contrasting styles and how much the crowd was just digging it. Yeah, so that was that.
That sounds like fun.
Yeah.
Far more lefty than most of the way I've been spending my time.
Yeah, so you texted me something about about how you didn't realize how far left you were. You knew how but it just like punched you in the face.
Oh yeah. So it's just so being a college professor, I'm back to teaching again in my what do we want to call it? The Stockholm syndrome of being an adjunct college professor. It's okay.
Yeah, Stockholm syndrome.
I enjoy being there. I enjoy my colleagues. I enjoy working with the students. I like teaching.
Of course,
it's helpful to have some money and then be able to spend the rest of my time how I want it, rather than working in a call center or something or delivering cookies. But no, it just the thing that I've been thinking about, the reason I texted you is that so Richard Wolff, the economist, he constantly, when people talk to him about, people say that the universities are full of Marxists, and it's like, and he says no they're not. I mean, he is one. I'm not a Marxist. He is, and he said, and he's just like, there aren't any.
Yeah.
I mean, most people and most college professors are basically some version of a rather, liberal Democrat, Yeah. Basically like liberal Elizabeth Warren in some sense, right? They criticize the system, but in general they want it to exist, right?
Right.
And and this is true of everybody I've known over the years, most of them, of college professors I know. And it just, I realized that I don't have an office this year, which isn't necessarily a problem. It's just I was having a conversation with a student of mine, or was a student of mine last year, and he was a person that would like talking to me and asking me questions that were sort of tangentially related to what we were doing, and I would talk to him about political things, and I wouldn't necessarily tell him my own opinion. I would just actually talk about the way that the society works and when things are unequal and all sorts of stuff. The kind of stuff that you talk about around politics, but to give the lay of the land about racism and stuff like that. Yeah. And I realized I was sitting in the middle of the theory office doing that. And I thought we were being ignored. And then, but he kind of pushes back on some of the things I was saying because, he's a very nice guy. Just, he gets his news from different places. Let's put it that way. And when you live in the middle of Ohio, you get different information than you would get from me, right?
Sure.
Which is fine. This is not a problem. We were just having a conversation. So I brought up implicit bias, and as soon as I said it, two of my colleagues who were standing nearby both kind of had a reaction. And I was just like, and I was sitting there going, "You're listening to me?" And I kind of had to sort of back away from that conversation because I realized I was being overheard. And usually when I'm having that kind of conversation with a student, I'm having it in a classroom or in my office or in a hallway somewhere.
Right.
And so when I talk to my colleagues, I don't really bring up my politics because it's not really useful. And there's no reason to discuss extremely difficult issues most of the time. So I kind of just don't... I just don't bring things up.
Right.
I mean, I do sometimes. I'm sure I do say trenchant things almost every day.
Sure.
But, this is not a problem. This isn't a problem in anything. I was making a mistake of how I was interacting in a particular environment.
So I'm confused.
But it's like they know what it is. It's just, well, think of it this way. It's basically like being at a dinner party or being at Thanksgiving and talking about politics or religion. Right? You're purposefully choosing to bring up a sensitive topic.
Right.
Everybody knows implicit bias exists in some sense, right?
Sure.
I mean, the people I work with know that. They're good liberals. They know all of this information, right? I mean, it's just like what they decide to do with it or how they decide to interact with it is up to them.
Yeah. So was it because you were talking to a student and it came up, or
no? It was just because It was mainly that I was having a conversation that was probably it's a friendly collegial environment, and I brought up implicit bias.
Right.
It was just like, let's not talk about that right now here. No one said that to me, of course. No one asked me to stop doing anything. It was just sort of like, I guess I should just move on.
Yeah.
But it just goes to show you, Dorian, that there are really only in certain sense politics should only enter certain places, and I'm mildly annoyed that. Well, let me say it this way. I've become a person who reads Paulo Freire, Pedagogy of the Oppressed, and agrees with it. Do you know that book?
No, I don't.
Okay, well, it's one you should read.
Yeah,
it's red. I always forget how to say his last name, but you type in Pedagogy.
Yep, found it already.
It's basically the idea is that the purpose of it that you can't separate politics from anything. And so anything you do in education is going to be a political act. So you have to do your political act knowingly.
Street Fight Radio, they talked about that very thing, how the amount of conservative older men they know who say they hate politics, but then get mad about some Hollywood actor saying something at an awards show, and it's like, don't you realize that's politics? You're doing it. Right,
exactly.
It's like you say you don't care, and then you care.
So I've chosen very consciously but Freire, what he talks about is using education as a form of consciousness raising. And so he was specifically teaching people in poor areas, I think in some South American country, I can't remember right now. It was Chile. It might have been it's one of those places.
Brazil is what was
Brazil.
Yeah.
Thank you. He speaks Portuguese. Yeah. Okay. So he got expelled from a country or something for that.
Yeah.
Anyway, but Freire, he was literally teaching, poor people to read. But he was also teaching them to read in order so that they could disturb the political situation of their lives, right? To gain more power for themselves and to achieve a more equitable society.
Yeah.
And I think that education, even music theory education, should do that to some extent. Now, does that mean I do that in my classes? No, my hands are pretty well tied.
Right.
But it means that, I can talk about the fact that I'm an adjunct and that I don't have time to grade certain things, or I can't do a lot of extra teaching that I would otherwise because I'm being only paid a certain amount of money, and therefore I can only dedicate this certain amount of time, and I can only answer emails at certain times. And then I explain, and when I take the time to actually say these things, I explain why this is the case and why the university is set up the way it is, and that education is really isn't for students. It's set up to do other things.
Right.
And so this kind of thinking, it's just like, so there are ways in which the social way in which our lives work affects all the things we do, and it affects how we choose what curriculum we have and all these sorts of things. And, and I come from a group of people that this is all given. But I'm realizing that in most other places in this field, or in any field, that's sort of thought of as extra information. It's not necessarily relevant to discuss.
There's a music camp I work at over the summer, and I had the realization just how liberal all my colleagues were, because everybody complains about the pay, and everybody complains about their bosses doing shitty things and just the unreliability of it. And I really started pushing, we should all just, collaborate together and, let our voices be known. Let people know what we're thinking. And everyone was like, oh, well, I don't want to, I do want to keep my job. And it's but everything about your job sucks. It's all we talk about. Why don't we actually do something about it? And like one of the consequences could be we lose it forever.
Yeah.
But it was very wild.
Oh yeah, no,
Realizing how little how much fear they had of losing a shitty job.
Right, of course. Well, that's
Yeah.
the main driver of most of these kind of decisions, is that
Yeah,
kind
exactly.
of hierarchical fear, right?
Right,
So
right.
it means that, like Richard Wolff says, there really aren't the idea from the right that universities are bastions of some radical left thing is just crazy.
Right.
Because being pretty, I'm a person who regularly scores in the quadrant compass test of political things in the bottom left-hand corner, like, pretty fucking close to the bottom left-hand corner, if not
Yes.
directly in it.
Yes.
I mean, I'm not talking about in the left bottom quadrant,
Right.
that I know very well that I am in the minority of opinions about what the role of education should be in society, and what the role of music theory or how I should teach my classes is with other people. Even in a place where we spend a lot of our work putting music into social and historical context. Because I'm willing to take the next step, which is to talk about racism in Stravinsky. And not I don't know if my colleagues would do that, but I would make a point to do so.
Right.
They might talk about it if someone else brings it up, or I'm not sure. I'd have to actually have that conversation with them, and I haven't, because it's clearly like, the society is changing enough that everybody's having to rejigger how they interact with these kind of social pressures around these kind of things. So I don't want to put in anybody else's mouth, but I do know that my own particular political persuasion and how I decide to be a musician and an educator leaves me in a very small minority of people in the university that I know. And so, that was just an example of the idea that I said implicit bias out loud in a room with 8 other people in it, in between classes, and 2 people that are my friends and I love very much, both kind of had a whoa, kind of like, oh God, someone just mentioned God.
Yeah, don't bring that up at the dinner table.
Right. Not that they not that they were against bringing it up. It was just one of them was like, oh, I hear about that at home all the time. Don't want to deal with that.
Right.
And it was like, oh, geez, okay. Well, you're going somewhere you've gone somewhere that I wasn't expecting. That's the kind of shock reaction. Yeah. So, I mean, I know for a fact that if I wanted to talk with them about that, each of them would have a conversation with me about that information. It was just their surprise was that's what surprised me.
Sure.
So, I mean, yeah.
I mean, the whole right wing idea that the universities are just these bastions of Marxist thought. Yeah. Why don't we ever talk about the really hardcore Austrian economics theory that's infected the economics and business schools?
Yeah, right. Well, that's the thing is that there are very conservative places in the university.
Yeah.
There's 2 of them, yeah.
Well, it's like, I mean, like if you look at like a sociology department, you're gonna have more left-leaning people just because of the nature of the work.
Right.
But it's looked as if that's the norm for a generally centrist liberal place, and then there's other places that are much further right. And
and if anything, a classical music department is going to tend to be on the conservative side of liberal, because you're going to tend to have more religious people, because classical music comes from a religious tradition. So again, it's just in our own particular environment. So that music camp you brought up, I mean, that place is, in some sense, a very conservative place. It's very conservative. Right. Now, that doesn't mean that a lot of the teachers that work there, or the people that work there over the summer, aren't in some sense people who would vote for Democrats.
Right.
It just means that compared to a Marxist, they're on a completely different spectrum of opinion.
None none of them are going to the monthly IWW meeting.
Right, exactly. I mean, how many of these other people that I know are going to willingly run for Congress as a Green Party candidate?
Right, exactly.
I mean, I did that knowingly and purposefully.
Right.
I mean, so I haven't met that many people who would run for Congress on the lark that I did.
Right.
And do it full throttle for 3 months.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
So.
Yeah.
Jeez. Yeah.
So, in part of my music therapy training, I switched internships from Mount Sinai, where I was working in psychiatry, like the psychiatric department, and asthma and Alzheimer's and environmental music therapy. Those were the main areas. And I switched over to MJHS, which is a hospice center. And just because that's something I'm way more interested in. And it was, I'm going through the orientation phase right now. And we had this really, really cool hospice and palliative care doctor come and talk to us just about hospice care. And he was like, all right, our country, and he kept specifying our country because he was like, it's different in every country, what is hospice and what is palliative. But our country, the way we define it. So actually, I'll just ask you, how would you define palliative care versus hospice care?
Oh, most people don't know, but
yes.
My father is a hospital chaplain.
Right.
Who's worked in hospice. So, let me see. I probably get this wrong, but let me guess.
It's okay. It's okay. I got it wrong too, and I've been working there for 2 weeks. So,
hospice care is taking care of people who are in some sense infirm or in needing of mobility assistance and taking care of their daily things. So they'll need to be in some kind of this. They can do at home hospice now, but it's sort of like you need a health care worker a nurse or something who helps you with your daily activities in some sense and keeps track of how you're doing. Palliative care is when we finally decided that you are likely to die soon. And so we're doing things now specifically to make the end of your days, in some sense, livable.
Cool. Are you ready?
Right.
You're close. You said the same thing I said, basically.
Okay.
So the way he defined it, he said palliative care is actually a specific theoretical model, meaning so it's critical care. That's acute care for people with life-threatening situations and diseases. Okay. Palliative care is an interprofessional model of care appropriate for any person or population with a life-limiting illness that is dedicated to preventing and relieving the suffering and illness burden of the patient and the family from the time of diagnosis forward.
Oh, okay.
Hospice. Yeah. Okay. So hospice is a specific form of palliative care in which, and here's the United States definition, is a U.S. government-supported health system established as an entitlement program under Medicare that offers specialist palliative care for eligible patients in the home.
So the thing you and I did is we gave general definitions of terms.
Yes.
What you're giving are specialist terminologies that have very much to do with how billing happens.
Yes.
Yeah, exactly. So that's an important distinction. Thank you for pointing that out.
But it was cool because he asked the room and everyone got it wrong. And keep in mind, this wasn't like a whole room of interns. I was actually the only intern. There were hospice trained nurses and there were social workers and caseworkers. Men and women in their 30s, 40s, and 50s. Some people were doing a career change who had worked in a hospital for 25 years. And everyone got it wrong. And this guy in particular, he's actually one of the people who really changed a lot of the palliative care and hospice care culture in the U.S. during the 90s. because he ran a lot of the research. He did a lot of the studies, and it was really cool because he never got political as far as being blatant with who he supports. But he was like, now I'm going to tell you all the truth. And I know truth can be a little difficult to come by in the country right now. Maybe it's always been that way, but it's particularly bad right now. Anyways, just know where you're voting. I just really, support there's one candidate who's just really pushing for better public health options. It was just, he was basically not saying Bernie Sanders, but
saying Bernie Sanders.
Yeah, and it made so much sense. It was like, of course, like a guy who is this specialized, and he's been 2 specialized doctors. He was originally a trauma therapist, and then he became a neurologist with a specificity in pain management, and that led him to hospice care.
Sure, right. Because that's where you're mainly doing most of your pain management.
Well, and he basically saw how horrible the system is.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, it's really terrible.
And I mean, he even talked about how guilt-ridden it is to be a doctor that gives a shit because of the income you make. And people who can't afford it are being forced to pay it. And it's an impossible task for one person to change. So it was very interesting. He was really, really insightful.
Right.
Lot of good info.
So let me backtrack. So I basically listening to what you said and looking up those terms on the internet again. Mm-hmm. I basically got them backwards. Yeah. So the palliative care is the generalized thing, and then when you get to hospice, that's when you've determined that you're
and this is where
but it's very important is that it's how the billable hour, all of the billable shit goes.
The thing he was saying that this is where it gets dirty, and this is why he was specifying the U.S. hospice system, and the reason people get it so mixed up is they had to define a bill on when somebody is eligible for hospice, and it's 6 months. But the thing is, people if you're
you can't guess.
Yeah, you can't guess 6 months. And I mean, just things the thing he told me that I thought. Oh, by the way, he's friends with Stephen Jenkinson.
Oh, there you go.
Yeah, it was I was like, oh, have you ever read Die Wise? And he was like, oh, Steve, yeah. So they know each other, which didn't.
Did I tell you about all that?
Yeah, you're the one who recommended. Yeah, you told me to read it, and I got it, and I did. It did not blow my mind. It blew my mind, but didn't surprise me that.
Right. That's the feeling of that book.
Yeah. Yeah.
Go ahead.
But yeah, he talked about how the United States culture has an existential denialism, and we don't like to acknowledge that it's going to end, and he even spoke about how one of the cases a friend of his, a nurse, had witnessed where there was a man who, it was 2 nurses' daughters and then a doctor working with this grandmother, or this older woman who was basically close to her deathbed, and the one nurse was saying, we should really put her on hospice, she needs to be in home, she just needs to be in bed and die with her family, peacefully. And the doctor was like, well, no, I think I can, and basically kept working on trying to cure her. And the woman died in the hospital 2 days later. And it's this awkward thing, because he was this doctor, the one that was speaking to us, he was like, it's not wrong for a doctor to want to cure somebody. That's being a good doctor. But we're in such denial of some of the natural causes that it's it's like it would have been better to just give her those 2 days to be comfortable.
Right.
You know, and yeah, so it just, I don't know, very, very insightful stuff.
Right. Well, again, it's that sort of thing of, and we live in such a society where that man has, the doctor who was giving you that session you were at.
Yeah.
He has to imply support for Bernie Sanders. He can't state it outright.
Yeah, he can't say that.
Yeah, that's the weird thing. Like, so I've been learning German for the past couple of months, and one of the things that I notice is I've been watching these videos called Easy German on YouTube, and so it's these people in Berlin, and they go around and they just ask people questions on the street.
Okay.
And it's all in German, of course, and there are subtitles, but they go around and they ask people about what are the social. This is the funniest thing is they went around and was like, what's taboo in German culture? Stick a microphone in your face. As one of the episodes, and apparently one of the things that's not really taboo is politics.
Really?
Yeah, so they're pretty much willing to talk about, of course there are taboos involved, but they're willing to have political discussions more willingly than we are.
Yeah.
Meaning that, like for example, in our society, the idea that someone's a socialist before Bernie Sanders became a well-known figure was literally like unthinkable. Like being one was unthinkable.
I mean, I was told Barack Obama was a socialist.
And that means that he's beyond the pale terrible, the worst thing you can be, right?
Yes. Right?
That's
literally what I was told.
Is like, that's a word that means evil person.
Yes.
In Germany, it's like, oh, well, there are these parties. Well, they got the Christian, you got the center left people and the center right people and the left people and the right people, and then there's the socialists and the communists, and there are those people over there that are basically Nazis again, and the anti-immigrant party. I mean, and they're willingly talk about socialists and communists and far right, all this stuff. I mean, because it's there. It exists, and it's a part of the system of government they have is one that require they have a parliament, so there's multiple parties jockeying for power, and so it means you actually have to pay attention to the extreme political parties that are not in power because they have in some sense a role to play. Whereas in our society, people outside of our manufactured consent of our two major parties, which are both notably farther to right than anything in Europe or anywhere else in the world. I mean, I was thinking about this yesterday, that how many countries are there like the United States, but the reverse in terms of how the political parties are split in their economic thoughts? Like in Europe, basically the center is, well, we like some things about socialism and we like some things about capitalism. But the real argument among the political parties on the political spectrum is, we think we should be capitalist versus we think we should be socialist. Let's fight.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
That's pretty much everywhere else. The only places that are like the United States in that we're only capitalist. I mean, you have the fucking Democratic person talking on CNN, the Speaker of the House, Nancy Pelosi, literally saying, well, we're capitalists. That's just how it is.
Right.
And she's told, and she is, according to everybody, a San Francisco liberal, which means she's really liberal.
Right.
Yeah, which of course liberal in our society means crazy leftist.
Well, I mean, Kamala Harris is
like, So liberal in our society in that sense means beyond the pale in that direction.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I mean, the idea that how many countries are the opposite of that, where it's so everybody's a socialist, and if you're not a socialist, you are evil.
Right.
I mean, there used to be a few more, but now it's Cuba.
Yep.
China.
Sort of.
Sort of, but not really. But
Yeah,
still,
yeah.
but they have an autocratic one-party state that
Right,
calls
right.
itself social communist. Yeah,
Right.
yeah. So and Venezuela, but not so much. I mean, they're trying to overturn it.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, but it's like, but most of the rest of the world, their political reality is that an argument
Mm-hmm.
about economic power and distribution.
Oh, yeah.
And our society is in turmoil because we're finally starting to do that a little bit.
So
It's crazy.
Yeah, it really is.
So,
I was gonna bring something up. Oh
all
yeah.
of those things, the one sentence I should say to tie back where I started is
Yes.
the fact that we're uncomfortable talking about difficult political things
Right.
just in a daily basis is part of the reason that this is so fucked up.
Right.
Is the fact that you and I, that we're supposed to feel uncomfortable talking about political things with even our friends.
So I was hanging out with a composer friend, and he was asking me questions about, what's it like to be left-wing military veteran,
Sure.
because he and I agree on so many issues when it comes to wealth inequality and like social welfare programs. I think I'm further along than he is, just because I'm actually for the abolishment of money. but
Yes.
I
Yes.
realize that's a few generations away.
Let's abolish the Senate while we're at it.
Yeah, exactly. But anyways, we agree on a lot of things, and he wanted to ask me what I thought about guns, and
Yeah, okay.
it was interesting because I was nervous to answer. And to be totally solid with you, I don't have I don't have all my views worked out yet on that. It took me a long time to get my views on abortion sort of organized because I'm vegetarian. I don't like killing. I'm anti-death penalty. I'm anti-war. So it was like for me to wrap my head around abortion took a while. Because it was like, okay, all these people I respect are pro-choice, and I just don't know how I feel about it. So I started reading like Richard Dawkins and like all these biologists, just to see like what they had to say about abortion, and it turns out that the first 2 trimesters there's no nervous system, so that immediately it was like, okay, first 2 trimesters I don't even have a moral qualm because my concerns about killing come down to consciousness and pain. So then it's like, all right, well that narrowed it down to like it's the 3rd trimester. Okay, so I do have
late-term abortion is the term. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So it's like, all right, I do have a bit of a moral qualm with the third term abortions. However, number one, it's not my decision. This is a discussion that women should be taking, in the lead on. And right now, our culture, it's mostly men making these decisions.
Let's reframe these statements to those who can get pregnant and those who cannot.
Yes, perfect way to. Yes, that's a much better way. So that's the first part, but then the second part is how can you claim to be pro-life, but then be anti-sex education and anti-contraception, and so it's like it literally like it's like I would be pro-life if it was talking about when the nervous system was formed, and if every other possibility had been filled out to its furthest potential, and it's just constantly getting blocked. So it's like it took me a long time to get to that point, to really figure out where I am in the pro-choice decisions. So I'm kind of going through that right now with weapons and guns, because first off, I think it's very funny you've said this before, how people think being anti-gun is a left-wing decision.
No.
It's like yeah, because the Black Panthers.
They're the ones who first made the argument that the Second Amendment meant a personal right to own a gun.
Yes. Well, and it was actually they were one of the reasons Republicans like Ronald Reagan were pro-gun control, because they wanted to keep it out of left-wing black activists' hands.
Right.
So I'm still figuring out my answer to this. I also should mention this composer. He's an African American gentleman, and when I mentioned the Black Panthers, he gave me kind of a head nod, and it was like so it's like he basically implied that he's figuring out his views too.
Right.
But it was just so interesting because we were nervous to talk about it when we literally know we agree on so many things.
Right. Yeah.
Just because. Yeah.
So let me go on a little here.
Sure.
So this will be a good story to sort of relate to this.
Okay.
So when I was running for Congress back in 2017. The particular, I think, was it Steve Scalise who got shot? There was a Republican, I can't remember, there was a Republican member of Congress who got shot at a baseball game.
Yes, and Rand Paul was there.
Right, it was the softball team of members of Congress.
Yeah.
Were playing a game.
The 2017.
And some crazy psychopath guy showed up and was shooting members of Congress. Yeah.
Yeah.
That was literally the day I was gonna be. That was the day before I was gonna be on state public television for a debate. And guess what? I wasn't talking about guns. And so one of the few times when, of course, this happens, because when you give everybody guns, pretty much everybody's going to use them to a certain extent.
Yeah.
Somebody who's sort of aligned, who was a supporter of Bernie in a sense, went and was shooting at Republican members of Congress. Insane person, just ridiculously stupid thing to do. The goal isn't to kill them. The goal isn't to harm them. The goal is to beat them politically.
Mm-hmm.
Come on. Anyway, so I was asking my campaign manager, who of course is just one of the other guys who's a Green Party person in South Carolina.
My God.
He's not like a political operative. He's just a guy. I mean, a great guy, Greg. Hey, Greg, if you're listening, he would be the one person who would basically agree with us in a lot of things.
Mm-hmm.
I remember talking to him on the phone that day as I was driving down to Columbia and going, I don't know. There isn't a left-wing position on guns.
Yeah.
I mean, there's a Democratic position on guns, and it sucks. It's called common sense gun control, which, of course, is not common sense, because if it was common sense, then Republicans would agree.
Mm-hmm.
And they don't. Right?
Right.
And so it's and the things they want to do are so milquetoast that they won't make any difference, right? It's like, okay, so we'll close the gun show loophole. Okay, I mean, yeah, that'll solve some things, but it won't do anything about the millions of guns that are out there right now. Yeah, so it's and let's bring back the assault weapons ban. But the assault weapons ban was like, oh well, we'll do this gun, but this other gun that has a different grip on it, that one's okay. So it solves some problems, but you end up doing the kind of means testing bullshit that Democrats tend to do, where they don't actually end up solving the problem.
Yeah,
they make it better, of course, but they don't make it better enough to make any kind of real dent in the issue.
Right.
Because the real issue with the gun problem is the fact that people own so many guns in the first place.
Right.
And then our society is so fucked that then some of these people decide to use them in really extremely antisocial ways.
Right.
It's not the fact that we can keep guns out of other people's hands because they don't own them yet. Because you can get a gun by breaking the law very easily.
Yeah.
Anyway.
I mean, yeah.
And then you got the problem of the fact that any kind of restriction on people's rights to own things in a capitalist society like the one we have is one that will be used against us. That is, radical people on the left.
Right.
Because it'll be designed to take down crazy people on the right, but they will apply it to us first.
Right.
Because that's who because Democrats are more afraid of leftists than they are of the extreme right.
Yeah. No,
so it means,
yeah.
So it means that do you want to take guns out of the hands of the Black Panthers, although they don't exist anymore, in some sense?
Yeah.
Right. But that's, of course, what the Republicans and the Democrats want.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like, if you want there to be some sort of armed uprising revolution, which I'm not really sure I want, although I would like a revolution very much. Whether or not I'm willing to kill lots of people to do so, I'm not really sure. That's a thing where you can't like make a determination whether or not you're pro or anti-gun.
Mm-hmm.
It's too complicated, right? The Democrats can be in some sense against more gun ownership or for gun control because they know they can't do anything about it.
Right.
I mean, but they're right to be the people who are advocating some change to our system because children are being murdered. Yeah, they're right. They're right to want us to have stricter gun laws.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But it didn't occur to me until another couple months later so I ended up saying something really I didn't say anything useful at the debate when that thing got brought up.
Yeah.
And then the Democrat didn't say the normal stupid Democrat thing, so I tried to say it.
Wow.
Tried to talk over the moderator. Yeah, so it was weird.
Wow.
Anyway. Right, it was like, oh my God, it's so conservative down here, I can't even say common sense gun reform. I mean, I don't say that, but the thing that I learned that was like a real left-wing position, although it wasn't necessarily a complete one or one that would make everybody on the left happy,
right,
was there's a woman who wrote a book called the History of the Indigenous Peoples' History of the United States or something. I can't remember. She wrote a different book about the Second Amendment, and I listened to an interview with her. I think it was on Intercepted, Jeremy Scahill's podcast.
Oh, okay. Yes.
And she basically said that the whole argument that we make in our public, the public thing about what the Second Amendment is and what it's for is wrong and bullshit. That is, the Democratic argument is that the Second Amendment is about militias in the 19th century. It's not about personal rights to own a gun.
Is the book called Loaded?
Wrong. Yes, I think so.
Yeah.
What's the author's name?
It's Roxanne Dunbar Ortiz.
Yeah, Ortiz.
Ortiz, yeah.
Yeah. So so she was on and she basically made the point that no, the reason all those laws were made is so that they did that Second Amendment so that they could go out and kill Indians.
Wow.
They wanted to secure the right to be able to take over the frontier. And so they needed a way to have white people militias that would go out and murder people. Right?
Yeah.
So the Second Amendment is a way to stoke that and make sure that happens. So the thing she advocated was repealing the Second Amendment.
Wow.
And I was like, now that's a fucking left-wing position. I wish I had knew about that 2 months ago. Because I would have said that on television.
Yeah. Wow.
I mean, can you imagine? I might have gotten press.
Oh, yeah.
some crazy person advocates repealing the second, because I was advocating repealing the exception clause from the 13th Amendment because we still do slavery in prisons.
Right.
I mean,
wow.
Can you imagine if I had advocated repealing the second? Like, it's a thing for a really well-known author and indigenous activist to say we should repeal the Second Amendment.
Yeah.
Nobody's going to think twice about that. I mean, like, of course she doesn't like the Second Amendment. But if a white dude says it, like, and I would credit her. I'd be like, she said that. I think she's right. It's like, it's like, yeah, but it's like, but yeah, really, I mean, seriously, I mean, if you repeal the Second Amendment, then you have to decide what you will actually do with gun laws.
Yeah.
Right? Because then it's not a constitutional right. Then you can actually legislate.
Wow, yes.
Because in the end, I mean, because that's the thing is, well, this is the way I think about the gun debate. It's two things. It's, there are clearly too many guns, and a bunch of people are going to use them in very bad ways because our society is so unequal that people feel the need to do antisocial acts to justify that they feel so undignified and terrible in their life because our society doesn't offer them anything.
Yeah.
Right. That's terrible. So the solution, in some sense, is to take away the guns. And the Republicans know that the only way to solve that problem under our current society that keeps it in some sense the same, is to take away people's guns. And since they know it's true, the only way they can protect their political advantage is by claiming that the other side is advocating that. Which, of course, literally no one except for, some crazy left-wing people, who includes me, I would actually say one of the things we have to do is we have to take people's guns away.
Wow.
Because that's the problem is the amount of guns we have.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, everybody knows that's true, but the Democrats know that is not a politically viable option for them, whatever politically viable means in their crazy heads.
Right.
So they don't advocate that. But the Republicans are smart enough to call the bluff and to say, yeah, you think we should take people's guns away. And that's the thing that they can get other people to go buy guns. And that's why everybody, whenever there's another mass shooting that reaches the news in some large amount, because there are so many of them now that we only get to hear about some of them.
Mm-hmm.
That's why gun sales go up every time. Is because people on the right know that the only solution to the problem is less guns. And that is so repugnant to them that they have to go buy more in order to protect themselves from the removal of their guns. Yeah. But that's the thing, is like, but you have to, can you, like, how many of us actually analyze the subtext of political arguments like this?
Yeah.
This is the reason that the abortion debate isn't about what most people think. 60% of people are in some sense pro-choice in this country.
Right.
You wouldn't know that from either of the political parties.
Oh, yeah.
Because there are still Democrats who are pro-life.
Right.
Even though they represent most of the population. Right? So it's, I mean, the real argument is everybody agrees that women should have, in some sense, control over their bodies. And everybody agrees that killing beings that have no power is a really terrible idea. But you can't have both of those things because we live in a world where women are going to choose to abort fetuses. So how do you make a politically viable solution out of that when they are the people who tend not to actually have any power themselves? So it means that nobody gets to make a purity argument about abortion.
My God.
No one can.
Yeah.
Because here's the deal. Like you were talking about death earlier, the idea that there's some moment at which we can call something dead clearly, like a very split second in time, like it's not dead and now it's dead, is impossible.
Right.
It's impossible. Our science is not good enough yet to do that, and it probably never will be.
Right.
The same is true about birth. Because the standard boring definition of birth is you went through a canal in someone else's body. That's just All that is moving from one place to another.
Wow.
So then you have to date it further. And
Yeah.
if you're a crazy purity person, you think, well, a conception, and that's clearly just ridiculous.
Right.
Because then every sperm is sacred, as the Monty Python song goes, right? And then you can take that argument to the point of The Handmaid's Tale, or the fact that you can make masturbation itself illegal because wet dreams are murder. Yeah.
What's the George Carlin comment? Not every masturbation. Do you know what I'm talking about?
I know that thing, but I can't think of it off the top of my head. Anyway, so it means that you have to choose who you care about more. Do you care about the human who has another human growing in them? Or do you care about the human being carried? And you get to decide whether or not you want to call that thing a human that's being grown.
Wow.
Yeah. And there isn't a clear line about when it happens. So everyone's going to argue. And it comes down to that third trimester abortion, right?
Right.
Because most people in this world would find it morally unconscionable to force a woman to have the child of their rapist.
Yeah.
Right? So it means that you're not 100% pro-life, whatever that bullshit term means.
Right.
By the way, pro-choice is also a bullshit term.
Right.
Yeah, that's why I like.
That's right wing marketing.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. Both of the. Well, it's all marketing, right?
Right.
The last bastion of human shit, marketing.
Uh-huh.
How do you get people to do things they don't want to do? Marketing. So it's that moment of, well, how do you make that decision? And in the end, holy fuck, why is the government making these decisions?
Right.
And that's where the anarchist comes out, where it's like,
yeah,
holy shit, what? It's so fucking complicated, and like I have nothing to do with what's going on, so why am I making decisions about who does what with what? I mean, so it's, in the end, with all this stuff, I mean, you're just measuring harm amounts, if you want to be utilitarian about it. And I can't answer the question. I don't know the fucking answer, and I really don't want to.
Yeah.
But as a left-wing person in this country, in the far left, I would much rather women have the autonomy to make those choices.
Yeah.
Because I know they can make choices. And they're humans, like me, but they have an ability I don't have. Thank goodness. I don't have to do that. And I'm grateful to not have to go through pregnancy. Let's let them make those choices.
Yeah.
Right? And whether they be women or trans men or what have you, yeah? Who can do those things. And, yeah. And if they want those reproductive rights, I'm more than welcome to have them. And if that means that there are going to be there are going to be some quote-unquote babies, I'll grant you the term, babies that would die otherwise because of women making an autonomous choice that they feel is best for their life. Okay. Because they're going to do it anyway.
Yeah.
Whether or not I want them to, they'll do it. It's just whether or not it'll be medically safe. And whether or not they'll die from the process.
Oh, yeah.
And you know what? Two beings dying in that moment is a bad idea.
Yeah.
Right. So it means, it's like, that's the thing about the gun debate, too, is that the idea that we're never going to have guns is laughable. It's like, or the thing that people talk about with the climate change. Oh, they're trying to get rid of cows. As if there'll ever be a time when there aren't cows and there still aren't humans.
Right.
It's like, I guess there could be a time in the future where we literally have no animals left at all and there are still humans, but I think that's pretty unlikely. But The idea that we won't have, like, for example, it's like if we stop using fossil fuels, will there suddenly not be planes? No, there will still be enough little bits of fossil fuels so that people can have planes. And are cars going to go away completely? Of course not. In lots of places around the world, the best way to get somewhere is an autonomous vehicle. And it's the only way we're going to have to be able to do that for a long time. But we can get to the point where all of those things go away to the point that most of us don't use them almost ever. Or that the technology is different enough that we don't have to use fossil fuels to do these things. That we won't all murder ourselves. We won't collectively murder ourselves.
Right.
So that's the thing is that that's the thing is that arguments are not made based upon whether or not the things we actually are arguing about. They're done as a form of, bullshit marketing. It's like, well, you think this, and it's like, well, no, I think these 10 things.
Yeah.
And some of them don't line up. And
exactly.
About everything.
Exactly.
Right.
Yeah,
so it means that you have preferences and you prioritize some things over others, right, Dorian? So, like, for example, you and I are both going to vote for Bernie Sanders.
Right.
In a perfect world, would we ever vote for Bernie Sanders?
No.
No, because there wouldn't be elections.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. We wouldn't be voting.
Bernie Sanders wouldn't agree with me. I wouldn't want to stake my claim on that man.
Yeah, exactly.
But in our current society and our current lives, Bernie Sanders is the best bet to make more people's lives better across the face of this planet than any other human right now. Because we live in the most powerful country in the world with the most fucking money, and he's the person actually running for in the place where people actually fucking pay attention.
Dude, I've been seeing on Facebook, and so I'm going to be totally upfront. I'm not nearly as anti-Warren as some of my left-wing friends.
Sure.
I don't support her, but it's like her policies are, like I agree with them for the most part.
I gave her money.
Yeah.
Earlier in the cycle, because I wanted to make sure I gave everybody to the left, anybody of some semblance on the left of most people money. So I gave her money, I gave Mike Gravel money, I gave Tulsi Gabbard money, and I've given I've been giving Bernie money.
Right. Well, so it was really fascinating. Just on Facebook, I've seen a lot of my liberal centrist friends. They'll be posting things about Warren being like, oh, she's just like Bernie, but with an actual plan of action. And it's mind-blowing. It's like, have you ever gone to his website? He's got an entire plan of action written out. Have you ever heard him talk? He has a plan of, that's how thick the propaganda is.
Well, it's also that what they mean by plan is not the same thing you and I mean by plan.
Yeah.
Because plan means where's the money going to come from, what percentage of it will be gotten from where with what. It's a bureaucratic plan. It's a thing that's like it's legislation ready that doesn't require a bunch of people to sit around later and figure out how to actually interpret it.
Yeah.
That's what they mean by plan. Bernie Sanders' plans don't have that level of specificity. Because guess what? You can't know that much information going into what's actually possible once you're president.
Yeah, exactly.
So the expectation that you are that specific. For example, at this point in the 2008 election, it would have been by this point. Say, 6 months ago, so in summer of 2007, everyone thought the election was going to be about the Iraq War. What did it end up being about?
And you're talking 2007?
2007 and 8. The last year. What was it about?
Hi.
Do you remember?
I'm actually...
It's okay.
Yeah, I'm trying to remember.
It was about the economic crisis.
Yeah. So you're talking about the crash.
Yes.
Yeah.
Exactly. So meaning we chose two people to be the nominees of the party based upon war.
Right.
and then they had to run a campaign based upon the economy.
Yeah.
And, because we probably would have chosen Romney and Clinton had it been about the economy.
Yeah.
Because they're technocrats.
Right.
Instead, we chose the war veteran and the upstart who said that he was against, and who had never had to vote for the Iraq War.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so it's like, so the idea at this point that we know what President Sanders or whomever's first year in office will be about,
right,
is ridiculous. How many of us thought we were going to be talking about fucking Ukraine right now?
How many of us thought we were going to be talking about Ukraine after the Kurds and after Venezuela and
Iran?
Yeah, exactly.
Who thought that Donald Trump wouldn't actually invade Iran and start a war yet?
Yeah.
I mean, that's the thing that's kind of nuts about all this is that Trump hasn't started his own war yet.
Yeah.
It's kind of amazing. But he's still got time. He's got plenty of time.
He could do it. No, that's something I've been talking about with a lot of people is like, it's like as dangerous and, fascistic as Trump is and how awful he is to immigrants and, just how he's a horrible person. It's like, well, he hasn't started a war yet.
I mean, he's murdered people
on
a grand scale.
He sure has.
With bombs and shit. And the drone program has expanded and all these things.
Mm-hmm. Military budget went up, I believe, $50 billion. Like
the Democrats let him enlarge the military budget by that much. Isn't that amazing?
Yeah, it's wild.
Yeah, it's wild. Right, exactly. So it's. I mean, it's bad. It's some bad shit.
Yeah.
But here's the deal: is that from our point of view, that was a nice burp. Did you think? Is that from our point of view, Elizabeth Warren is just like every other Democrat in terms of her foreign policy.
Oh yeah.
And it's like she's militarist bullshit in that regard. Whereas Bernie Sanders actually has some semblance of some anti-warness to him.
Yeah.
Although he is still an American imperialist.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. It's kind of a weird thing, isn't it?
Yeah.
That even our left-wing guy's an imperialist.
Yeah, Seth Davis actually sent me a really interesting article that was titled "Who Would Sanders Bomb?" And
he'll bomb somebody.
Yeah, I can't remember. It was who would?
How will Bernie Sanders become a war criminal? That's an article to write.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I can't remember where the post. It might have been just a Medium. No, it was Politico.
There you go.
Yeah. Well, anyways, we are at the hour mark. We're past the hour mark.
You don't want to talk more about that?
Yeah. So we're back. We took a little break for January. I got sick and then had some mental health stuff pop up, and so I'm good to go now. And
I was busy. Having to do stuff with flying the doctor.
Yeah. So we're back with Trysteropod. My name is Dorian Wallace, and this is David Kulma, and we'll catch you next time.
Hopefully Bernie won in Iowa.